Alli, what's up?
How are you?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for asking. You ready to dive in?
I am. Are you in
Cool.
California?
No, I'm born and raised in Queens. I'm in Queens right now, New York.
I was born in New York too. Uh,
Awesome. Which part?
well, Long Island, like Nassau County, but
Very familiar.
I am not because I asked you if you were in California because there's so many fucking mosquitoes in California and I'm sitting outside and I'm lighting incense to like citronella incense because it's so bad. So anyways, but yeah, I was like a baby when I was born there, and then we moved when I was young. But I lived in New York City all of my 20s, but that's all.
What's your favorite pizza spot in New York City?
I feel like if I tell you, you're gonna really judge me.
Is it a 99 cents pizza spot?
No, I'm not well versed enough in this space, but I will tell you when I lived in New York, I loved Two Boots. I don't think it exists anymore.
Oh, no, it does. It does. I was just there,
They
I
have
don't
like
know,
the
a couple of
pepper
weeks ago.
crust. Oh, it is? Because every time
Yeah, definitely.
recently I've tried to find one and I feel like I've had a harder time, but it's like the peppery crust, so good.
It's very good. It's very good. There's actually one in Park Slope, right by my girlfriend's house, so I go there rather often.
Oh, I love Two Boots. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's so
good
I'm
stuff.
so glad. Yeah.
I'm gonna re-ask you a question that I already asked you. By the
Okay.
way, I roll like I'm already recording. I keep this super lax, like just very conversational. Um, I'm gonna ask you, how are you again? Because for numerous reasons, we just gave each other quick responses. I'm curious, like, how are you really?
How am I really? Well, um, I am a mixed bag, I would say. I have some really, really hard shit happening in my life right now, and I
Mm,
have some really amazing stuff happening. So yeah, it's a big mix right now. There's a mix of like some really fun, exciting things that I'm really looking forward to, and then there's some really hard shit that's really hard to navigate through. So
yeah,
that's what I'm really doing.
yeah. I'm curious to learn how you essentially navigate the hardship, right? Like, how do you not let the stuff that feels like it's weighing you down impact the great stuff that you have in your life?
That's a very good question. Um, I think this has been, I would say, really the last few years, but in certainly the last few months for me have been an enormous um, growth and really like, sinking my teeth into areas of myself really that I was kind of avoiding
Mm,
and doing a lot of like work on myself. And, I feel like that's such a like, I'm doing work on myself. It's like everyone's always saying that, but I'm, I mean, I, I'm working with several people, coaches, therapists, and I feel like I have read so many books in the last few months about, childhood trauma, like really like learning how to love yourself and all these things seem really like kind of abstract and things that like we just say. Um, but like learning how to like reprogram my brain,
mm,
writing, doing a lot of journaling and um I'm sure you're familiar with Byron Katie and like the whole model of like telling the storytelling we do and just a lot of like deep dive of all that stuff. I actually was I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Amen. He's if you're not, you should be.
yeah, from the
You
Amen
know,
Clinic. Yeah, I'm very familiar. Yeah.
so I discovered his stuff years ago, and I really wanted to go get like a brain scan, and I never did it. It's really expensive and whatever, and I just never did it. And he reached out to me to like come in and be on his podcast to promote my new book, The Messy Truth, which as you know, and so of course I jumped at the opportunity, and I literally just had that done yesterday. So I was on his podcast, and we were like, he was like dissecting my brain and telling me, I had a brain scan. I went through all the cognitive testing and all of that stuff, and it was very fascinating. Um, but it's really interesting how, by the way, he said I had a stunningly beautiful brain, which is like literally the best compliment I think I've ever gotten. Because I was prepared for him to be like, shit is fucked up in there, lady, but it was really interesting. And there are areas, it's funny, there's like an area in my brain that's like extremely overactive that he's like, we got to calm that down. Like you're a very like quick thinker, like quick, like go, 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 which is so my personality. But it's just really interesting as you start to discover, at least for me anyways, as I've started to discover more and more about myself and self-awareness, it's like, it's so easy to coast along without being aware of like what's really going on for you and what you're avoiding. And there's a lot of stuff I've been avoiding. And so, yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. I mean, firstly, I'm very curious if I'm not going to violate any HIPAA compliance by asking you about your brain scan. I know one of the keys to making sure you have a beautiful brain is not drinking. Do you not drink?
I don't.
Okay. Yeah, I know that's a big thing that he talks about. Like that's like super destructive.
Yeah,
So
I don't drink because, well, I never really liked drinking, and I have like a weird. I'd really like to understand what this is about. I forgot to ask him, but I'm gonna ask him. When I have drank in the past, I get a really weird like pain behind my ears, like almost like a sharp shooting pain that is really uncomfortable. And so for years, like in my 20s, I was like trying to figure out, is it vodka? Is it wine? Like what's in it, And ultimately I'm sure I have some sort of allergy to some sort of alcohol. And I never figured out what it is, but it is like, talk about like self-awareness and being discerning. I'm like, why am I going to keep drinking? And I obviously that my body rejects this.
right.
But and then my in my book I talk a lot about my son who's 18 and went through rehab, and he had he's my ex-husband is an alcoholic. I mean, I'm just really surrounded by addicts, and you have been really exposed to that, and I've just had a really like negative view on drinking, and more of like the addiction to drinking that really turned me off personally to drinking. I can drink fine. Like I can drink a couple, I'm also like, when I was drinking more or drinking, I would have like half a glass of wine when most people would have had two by then. They just never really enjoyed it. I also don't like being like out of control. And it makes me sleepy. And at my age, I feel so shitty the next day that I'm like, it has been years since I drank. Years. And I just, I have no desire for it. And and now there's so much, it's like, it's quite literally poison, and I know that's not a popular thing to say, but like it is. And I don't know why we would, I know why people do it. I get it, but I just choose to. It's been harmful.
I mean, that's a perfect segue. Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. I mean, that's a perfect segue, right? I mean, people do it to an extent, obviously for the social aspect of it, but maybe on a subconscious level, like to avoid, which is one of the things you mentioned. Like you said that there's areas of your life that you were avoiding, like doing the deep dive into. I'm curious to learn, if you don't mind sharing, why were you avoiding them? Were you scared to see what was on the other side?
Yeah. I think we avoid things that we don't want to know about ourselves. And, I think we do it in relationships. I think we do it in business. And, I mean, even in like the dry bar era, I would, I talk about this a bit in the book of like how I was like, I didn't really realize this, although when it was brought to me, I was like, oh, I can see that. It's like my brother would tell me, my brother's my business partner in dry bar. He would tell me, people are scared of you. And I was like, I'll let this go by. Can you hear that?
Yeah, but it's all good. I'm super casual and chill about this shit. Like it's
so
we're chilling.
My brother, he told me like once, he's like, people are really scared of you. And I was like, what do you mean people are scared of me? He's like, what I took for like, passion and like really caring about this thing and making sure it was perfect and whatever, really like scared people and freaked people out because of my delivery on how I would walk into stores and get really obviously upset at what I was seeing. If, because for me, it was like, I could walk into a dry bar and you know, if you walked in, you'd be like, this place is fucking awesome. And it's hopping and it's loud and it's busy and whatever. And I would see all the things that were wrong. And
Mm.
what I learned over time was like how to like channel the information to the right person versus like throwing a fit, which is what I did early on. And that was like, you know, one of the things that my brother brought to my attention. And so, you know, and in that vein, you know, it was like I would go to my brother a lot, and maybe it was like a safety because he was my family, and I would complain and I would say this and that, but I wouldn't bring it. I wouldn't always bring it to the person I should have brought it to have like the real conversation, because I didn't want it. It was scary and I didn't want the conflict.
Mm.
And I just, you know, I took like kind of the cowardly way out and just like bitched about it to my brother, you know, and I think that that's one of those things. It's like avoiding hard conversations. And, you know, and I think I've done that in relationships too, where it's like you just, there's this thing and you don't want to talk about it because you're afraid if you talk about it, it's going to like blow everything up. And that's a risk, you know, that you take if you talk about what's really going on for you. The alternative is you just avoid it and you just don't talk about it and kind of hope it goes away or hope things change naturally, which they don't, you know. But when you're
Mm.
in it and you're like, it would be harder to have this conversation than, you know, because the outcome of what might happen if I say this thing, I don't want that outcome. So I'm just gonna pretend, I'm just gonna keep moving, you know. And so I think
Yeah.
that's what happens is we get stuck in this like, it's good enough. I'm gonna just keep chugging along, and then it all blows up.
What came over you, or maybe it was a life experience, maybe it was a person that instilled the courage in you to stop avoiding and to start facing?
Well, you know, I think when the rug kind of gets pulled out from under you and you know,
Mm.
you're kind of forced to deal with some things, you know, like in my case, when my son, who's now 18, who's doing incredibly well, by the way, he's playing football at Denison University in Ohio. Like I just took him to college a few months ago. But you know, when that all exploded and we realized like he had a problem and he was drinking and he was cutting and he was doing all sorts of stuff, it was like, oh my God. And of course the first thing I thought was like, I'm a terrible mother and I'm embarrassed and all of that, and felt really a lot of shame, you know. And once I got over that, I was like, I wasn't, you learn very quickly like something isn't working, right? And
Mm.
I realized through like some coaching and help from like trusted people around me that I wasn't, you know, I wasn't really curious what was going on with my son. I was more like, as I don't know if you have kids. I don't think you do because you said you had a
Not
girlfriend.
yet. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of a normal, I mean, I think all parents fuck up their kids in some way. And, you know, I think we get better and better, but you know, I wasn't really curious about what was going on with my son versus, I mean, I was probably to some degree, but I was more like, you shouldn't do this. This is bad and wrong. And why are
Mm.
you fucking up your life? And why are you not listening to your mother who's like so much smarter and wiser than you? And that doesn't work, you know? And I learned that the hard way. It's like that, you know, repels them even more, you know. And so I realized like I had to figure out a different way to approach this situation because it was not working what I was doing. And, you know, instead of, you know, telling him and all the things he was doing wrong, in my opinion, I had to hear why he was where he was in a very non-judgmental way. You know, and when you're faced with that kind of like situation, you know, you like, you kind of sober up very quickly and you're like, I gotta make some major changes, you know. And then that has a ripple effect on the rest of your life because you're like, oh, what else am I not being curious about, and what else am I, you know, not being open to. And one of the things I've kind of learned in my recent journey is like the beginner mindset, you know, which,
Mm.
you know, I don't know how to say this and it not come out wrong, but it's like, you know, I've had a lot of success. Like I've done pretty well for myself in my life, you know. So it's there, that comes with some arrogance of like, I know what I'm doing. Like I've done it, I've done this great thing. But then you're like, wait a second, you know, that is not the way to live. And getting back into the beginner's mindset of like, I don't know anything. I need to learn everything. It's just such a much better place to live from, instead of like having to keep up this facade of like, I have all the answers. Made it. Like, I don't feel like that at all, you know?
Mm.
So that's been a big like discovery for me too.
Before I ask you this next question, can we just go back and redo that take? Like, own the success that you have. Like, you're humble as it is. Just like come out and be like, I made a lot of fucking money. Like,
Well, I mean, it's really not. It's so interesting. Yes, I have made a lot of money, and yes, I have had a lot of success, and I am very proud of that, and I've worked really hard for it. But it also, success is such a weird thing. It's like I'm also at like a really
mm,
tough point in my life, which again, I know it's like, cry me a river. Like, it's such, again, I'm careful with the way I talk about this because, some people will look at like someone like me and be like, she has this massive business and she sold it for all this money. And which, by the way, if you ever, if you look at, we sold Dry Bar for 255 million, like I didn't get that money. Like I have a very, very small percentage of that, just for the record. I think people don't often understand that that's how that works. And if you Google me, what it says my net worth is not correct, So anyway, just for the fucking record, I wish it was right. But so I think that you end up in this place where you're like, okay, I've done this thing and I have a lot of like space and time and resources and money to do kind of whatever I want. But what do I want now?
mm,
It's like when it's kind of like the analogy. I feel like, of like rich kids, kids who are born into like a really wealthy family and don't have to do anything really because they know they have all this money. And so you lose purpose because you don't feel like you have to work for money. My kids don't have that. My kids are like, they very much know that like what I've made and what I've done is mine. And of course I take care of my kids, but like they're not like trust fund babies. And I want that. I don't want them to think they have that fallback because I think it'll take away their purpose and I think and their drive and ambition. And I think that like when you get to like, first of all, you're just changing so much when you get to like midlife, like I am 48 years old and I'm like, what do I want to, I feel like I'm 20 in a lot of ways. Like I'm like at the beginning again. Like what do I want to do? What excites me? What lights me up in this, phase of my life? Because I'm not, you know, I don't want to like be on vacation all the time. Like I want to do something. And I have started to really try to dig in and figure out what that is. It's just a weird life place to be, and again, I'm so probably choppy with how I'm explaining this because I'm really sensitive to how this gets interpreted to people are like rolling their eyes like, oh yeah, you have it so hard, but I know that I don't. And I'm very grateful for all that I have, but everybody has their set of problems no matter where you are in life.
yeah. I'm curious if you feel this way because you believe I believe you said you're 48. If you believe that at 48 you should be somewhere else.
I don't know where it should be. I think that's
Mm,
that's the conundrum I'm in. Is like um I'm at, a really big inflection point in my life of where I want to be emotionally, where I want to be like professionally, where I want to be living, like what I want to be doing with my time.
yeah.
So it's a big question mark for me right now. And I'm exploring a lot of different things to try to figure that out, which is why I said I feel like I'm 20 because, in your 20s, that's what you're meant to do, right? Is like, I did that. I, tried a million different jobs. I moved to New York and I did all these things to try to figure out what I loved, and I didn't really land on it until I was like 30-ish maybe I think I was maybe 35 when we started Dry Bar, which was really my ultimate, obviously my biggest success and my real calling and the thing that I fell in love with. And it was great for me, and now 13 years later, I'm kind of like, what am I doing now? So,
Mm,
and for me, for the most part, I feel really passionately about giving back and being of service in lots of different ways. And like, I do a lot of mentoring to entrepreneurs. I speak at a lot of things and I really get a lot of joy out of that. And, so I'm figuring out different ways to kind of harness that and, just trying lots of different things.
yeah. You posted something on Instagram recently, and it's something that I talk about rather often on the show. In fact, I think I had my mind blown by the episode that we just released last week by a gentleman named Erwin McManus. I'm not sure if you're
Oh,
familiar with Erwin. Yeah,
yes. I go to
yeah.
Mosaic.
Oh, you do? Okay, dope.
I
Yeah,
know
we had a really
Yeah.
good we
He's
had a good
amazing.
convo. Yeah, you posted something about God's plan. Like it was an illustration on your Instagram,
Oh
right? It was
yeah,
a
I know what you're talking
graphic.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious, like in conjunction with what we're talking about here, do you feel like God's plan, and this is where I had my mind blown, like Erwin elaborated because I'm born Roman Catholic. I went to
Mm-hmm.
Catholic school my whole life up until college, and
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty much under the impression that God's plan is like laid out for us, right? Like you're going to
Mm-hmm.
be doing this at this point, this at this point, like that's the
Yeah.
way I always viewed it. Erwin,
Yeah.
on the other hand, came in and he was like, Matt, like, not for nothing. Like, let's keep it real. Going all the way back to Adam and Eve, there was only one thing that they weren't allowed to do in the garden. Everything else they were allowed to do. Like, God's plan is abundant, but there's one thing you shouldn't do, which is, you know, hurt others, hurt yourself, or diminish God's like value or power, etc.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, what do you mean specifically?
Yeah, like
Like,
I'm just referencing this to what you're sharing here. Like, do you
oh,
feel
God's
like,
plan.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't think it's all laid out.
okay,
Um, I think that, and also I'm in an interesting place with religion because I'm Jewish, and recently discovered Mosaic and started going to Mosaic, and what I love about Erwin, and I listened to many of his talks in person, and have had the good fortune of getting to know him a little, and um, I feel like I was never super religious as a kid, and I didn't get bar mitzvah, and then my ex-husband was Mormon, and so that was a weird that was I shouldn't say weird, that was an interesting religion, um, and so I just never really thought much about it until I discovered Mosaic and listened to the way Erwin speaks, and like how
mm,
he so beautifully connects real life to stuff, to the Bible and like religion, and it's just so masterful how he does that, and I was just so inspired by it, and more to your question, I mean, my son Grant, who's 18, who's the one in college, he's really gotten into, he's studying theology in school, like he's
mm,
very into the study of God and religion, and so we're talking about that stuff all the time now, and I it's fascinating, and he's kind of like always coming back to me with like something new and a new, there's just so much to learn, and there's so many different schools of thought on this, and like I've always felt like, again, I'm pretty ignorant to a lot of the stuff, so keep that in mind. Like, who actually, like the people who wrote the Bible and how many different times it's been interpreted and what the interpretations mean and all of that is really like hard to like digest, I think. But I think that I heard someone say, I don't know if it was Irwin, one time in some talk I was listening to, that, God is a gentleman. And if you call him in and ask for something, or ask, whatever, that God will be there for you. It was kind of, I'm paraphrasing. And I think that like we, I believe that like God lives inside us. And I believe that like we make decisions, and which ultimately start to determine which way things go. But if we made another decision, things would go a different way. I don't
mm,
think that there's like a premeditated, this is what's going to happen in your life no matter what you do. But I do think that I believe that I mean, to me, it's a little bit like God and the universe and a higher power kind of all mixed into one, where I believe that like things that, like, for example, don't work out the way you wanted them to, or you thought that they should have, is a little bit of divine intervention of like, I know you really wanted this thing to be, and it's not going to be, and you feel like it's like the worst thing ever. And then eventually you come around to see that like what a fucking blessing that was, and even like with my son having gone through what he did, which was literally hell. I mean, one day you'll have children and you'll understand that, the depth of love that you have for your kids is just, incomparable to anything else in the world. And
right,
my son was going through this, you know, and I didn't know what was going to happen to him. I didn't know if he was going to like live. Like it was really, really rough, and it was hell. Like it was awful. And in the time that was happening, I felt like this is so unfair. Like, what did I do to deserve this? Like very victim-y, and it was hard to get through it. And we did. And it took about 2.5 years. It was a really rough 2.5 years. But, where my son is on the other side and all the things that he went through and all the treatment centers that he was in were so incredibly like impactful to his life. One of the places he went was this place called Evoke, which is like these kids live off the land in Utah for an unset amount of time. My son was there for maybe 3 or 4 months. And like, we went to visit him once there. Like he could make fire out of like nothing, he was whittling wood, like spoon, like it was insane how much he had grown in that period of time. And the growth that he gained in that period was just mind blowing. And I walked away from that experience just having been there for him for just 24 hours. And then how much he changed from all of those experiences, thinking like, I think this is like every human should have to go through. I mean, it's far better than like our traditional fucking school system. It's like what my son learned in this, having to be on his own, having to like fend for himself to a certain degree, having, people to talk to, like therapy, and people to like kids who were going through. I mean, it was just, and as a result too, is that, right after my divorce with my first husband, and we were, not really speaking. And then we had to come together for Grant because we had to do therapy together and all that stuff. And so like then that all like our family unit got much stronger. It was like so much good came out of that time, as hard as it was. And I would not change it. Like if you asked me if you could do it over where Grant didn't have to go to rehab and Grant didn't have to go through what he went through, I would say no. I wouldn't. I would keep it how it is. But I wouldn't have said that in the moment, So I think that there's things that like happen, and God is there, like guiding, not planning. Maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I'm curious. I mean, you obviously have the experience to answer this, from motherhood, from being a partner, from even being in business, being a friend. I'm curious what your opinion is in regards to us not projecting our conditioning onto others. So whether, that be in a relationship or in parenting, like how do we not take our constructs and place them onto other people?
Yeah, that's another good question. I mean, I think it's all part of like the learning and the learning that we do about ourselves, and like, letting go of control of what you want somebody to be, or, getting into a relationship with the potential of somebody, I think that a lot of it comes down to, control. Like for me, I have a lot of control issues. I want things to be the way that I want them to be. And so I do think I put that construct on, like, oh, you should be doing it this way, or you should do it this way, which does not work, and versus the acceptance of this is how you are. And, my best friend and I talk about that a lot when we're in a situation with someone that we're struggling with, and they're just not going to change. Like they are who they are. And it's kind of like, oh, there's, Matt being Matt, I don't like it, but it's not mine to change or control. So, and I think that's more the philosophy that I've tried to adopt anyways. I'm certainly not, I don't always do it, but, just like acceptance of people, being acceptant of people and where they are, versus trying to impose your idea of what they should be on them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not easy. Not easy at all.
Not easy. I mean, it's just because, you're like, it's our ego, I think, of being like, oh, but if you did this, Matt, this would be so much better, but it's like, it's not mine. It's yours to figure out, and it's just, which I think is largely a thing about parenthood. I used to say that to my kids, and like, I can't even believe I'm going to say this. Like I cringe at like saying it, but I used to say to my kids, like, I've been through so much more life than you. Like I know so much more than you because of what I've been through, and blah, 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 and my kids would always kind of like roll their eyes at that. And I was like, why do they do that? Like, I am smarter than them. I do know more than them. Like I've been through more life, like just objectively, I've been through more. So I know more, but it's not that black and white, and again, it goes back to like what I'm trying to adopt with it, which is this beginner's mindset of like, there's just always more to learn, and you can learn a lot from your kids and still guide them. But allow them to be who they actually are, you know?
Mm. How do you put forth that beginner's mindset? Like, what are you doing like daily? What does that look like?
I think it's like a constant reminder, you know. And I think it goes back to like the self-awareness piece of being like catching yourself and actively thinking about it, you know, because I think it's so easy for us to go on autopilot and just like,
Mm.
again, like I mentioned before, it's like we're cruising along, we're doing our thing, and we're not like thinking about anything else than what's like right in front of us and like what we're doing or what we're focusing on. And then I do think that part of like meditation and like, you know, enriching yourself, it's like you've heard people say this, I'm sure, like, you know, what we ingest, whether like what we're watching, what we're listening to, who we're talking to, who we're surrounding ourselves with is ultimately like all of that stuff like penetrates, you know. So for me, like surrounding myself with like-minded people who have that like, you know, let's keep learning and growing versus like the know-it-all. And you know the difference, right? You can spot it pretty quickly in people. And um I prefer and to surround myself with that more. And I think that's a big way, you know, having those people in your life that remind you of that. And like my son is very much like that, you know. He's so, I mean, he's 18, but he's so like you know, he you know, he's just like, he's very into Jesus right now and learning a lot about Jesus, which is pretty fascinating stuff. And I love learning through him. And, you know, I said he was reposting some stuff from his high school football team about the, like, really like highlighting these kids from that he knew from his football team. And it was really sweet and kind of him to do. And I told him that I loved that he was doing that. I was really proud of him. And he's like, I'm just trying to be like Jesus, mom, you know? And it was
Mm.
this like, again, like this, like, I'm just trying to be a really good person. And I think when you're trying to be a good person, you're trying to do the right thing. You know, I also just saw this thing that Oprah was on the podcast, that you can do hard things with what's her name? Oh my God, I'm blanking.
Oh,
Um
is that Glennon Doyle or Brene
I kinda
Brown?
do it, yeah. And, you
Yeah.
know, and he was like saying, and I'm a huge Oprah fan and I listen to all her books and I've, you know, I mean, who isn't an Oprah fan? But, you know, I mean, so much of what she talks about is this like, just be good, like be good to people. And a lot of like the being good is not being a know-it-all and not being like thinking you're always right and you have all the answers. It's like being able to take a step back and be like, and granted, I am not historically very good at this, but I'm trying to be, where it's like, you don't, someone challenges you, you don't like something someone says, like instead of getting pissed off and defensive, which is like been my MO most of my life, is like, tell me more. I want to understand what you mean,
Mm.
you know, versus the like, you know, get defensive. Because I think you can feel defensive. And like for me, I can feel very fiery when something like that happens. But then like let me like get curious about it. And I think that's something that you have to like teach yourself how to like stop and be like, wait. I don't want to be an asshole right now. I want to hear what they're trying to say and try to learn something, you know? And you know, of course you don't always agree, but so I think it's just, I think it's the conditioning that we do to ourselves. And again, like what we surround ourselves with, like who are we listening to? I mean, on Instagram, what books are we listening to? What friends, you know, my very best friend in the world, her name is Paige, and she's been on this like spiritual journey for a long time. And I jokingly always say that I've like been riding her spiritual coattails because I kind of like do what she does because she's changed so much. We've been friends for 18 years since our boys were babies. And I've watched her evolve into this like softer, just amazing, you know, and it's like, it's just because she's doing the work on herself and she's, you know,
Mm.
reading the books that help us. And so I think it's so largely of how and who we surround ourselves with. It's
I love
very
that. I just want to let you know I'm a very emotional guy and you almost made me cry, so I'm glad you continued to talk when you shared that your son said that he's just trying to be like Jesus.
Mm.
That and I'm getting teary-eyed right now. Like that
No,
almost
it's
made me
so
cry.
sweet. I know. I
That
mean,
is powerful.
it is, right? You know, and it's like, you know, as somebody who was, you know, my parents were not religious. My mom didn't really believe in God. My mom died like 7 years ago, but I, you know, and I mean, I would love for her to see all that's happened now. It's so crazy. But,
Mm,
you know, I think I had this like weird feeling about like God, religion, and Jesus, and you know, and for Grant's perspective on it is like he was just a really cool guy and didn't judge anybody and would hang out with prostitutes and like the people that everybody else shunned and like just so good. And you're like, fuck yeah. What? Yeah. I mean, isn't that like the goal? Like to not be judgmental of people and to love everybody and you know, and I struggle with that. You know, I'm very judgmental. My default is judgmental. Like I'm very judgmental of myself. I'm very
mhm.
judgmental of others. And I have to like really remind myself to not be that way. And I think it's like a real discipline, you know, and I think that's something that I'm also learning at this later stage of my life is like self mastery. You know, I'm an incredibly reactive person, which I think has actually served me somewhat well in business, but like it doesn't in personal relationships to be like just pop off so easily versus like let me take a breath before I respond, before I say something I'm going to regret, you know, and having that mentality of like I'm just trying to be like Jesus is pretty amazing, you know.
It is, absolutely. I just want to pause and say thank you for your vulnerability throughout this. I know that we still have you here for, 20 minutes or so, but you've been super vulnerable throughout this entire interview, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I know you're vulnerable in the book and whatnot, and I'll use that as the segue to start talking about it. Specifically
Yeah.
the subtitle, because the subtitle, I wrote it down, how I sold my business for millions, but almost lost myself.
Yeah.
And the part of the subtitle that I want to talk about is the losing yourself, because my opinion of losing ourselves, like we have to know who we are. So when you put that in your subtitle, what does that mean exactly? And I'm going to give you an example, right? Like when we're born, we don't know who we are. We have our parents, society, friends. I mean, I went to Catholic school my whole life, but I wanted to be in a gang so bad. Like the like that wasn't who I was, but that was what was around me, you know?
Yeah, the allure.
Um,
Yeah.
like all of those things, we have all of these constructs. So like when you say lose yourself, are you referring to losing who you were at your core, or were you referring to losing yourself, like who you thought Alli was?
Hmm. I've not been asked this question. You know, I think it's the way I think about it at first blush is like I just got very lost as a human when I was in on this like rocket ship of this building and growing this business that was really intoxicating and exciting and alluring. Um,
Mm,
but I lost like track of myself. Like I realized, and part of this was like the demise of my marriage and my son and all the things that were happening, that I was very like disconnected from myself, and I was living this life that wasn't totally, um, I don't know, like spiritually connected, I guess, to myself. I don't know how to put it. Like I was like out here and not in here. You know, I was
mm,
not. I didn't know what I didn't know who I was. Like I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what I didn't like. I was just on like autopilot, doing what I think I thought I should do with my life. You know, it was like I got married, I had kids, I started this business. The business got really successful, so I, you know, rode that, you know, you know, and it was like it was really intoxicating, and it was like, you know, it's interesting when you're put into a position of like, you know, a lot of people praising you, and I got so much outside validation that was very it was like a drug, I think is the best
mm,
way to put it. You know, it's like when people are constantly telling you how great you are, and you know, and we did. It was so fascinating, right? Like we changed an industry. Like we like came in guns blazing, and you know, it disrupted $1 billion industry. It was like I didn't mean to do that, by the way. It just kind of happened, and and then it was like, you know, I had never felt that kind of attention. I'd never felt that kind of like adoration, and you know, the privilege and the entire the like, you know, things that I was able to do and places I was able to go and the free shit people were sending me. And it was just like all of it was so like, wow, like I'm a big deal, And then I was
Mhm.
like, what? Like, no, and it was like, this is all like fluff and smoke and mirrors. It was like nice and it felt good, but it was like, who am I like really inside? And I really didn't know. And so I felt very lost because I was just, I was like feeding off of this thing that I was in. And I mean, I loved it, and it wasn't like all bad. It was just, what that does for you emotionally is like, it makes you feel like, or at least what it did for me was make me feel like that is my worth. Being the
Mhm.
founder of Dry Bar is my worth. And that's why people love me. And that's why people want to do things for me and want to blah, 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 all that stuff. And then it was like, well, what about like who I am underneath all of that? And I didn't really realize any of this until we sold the business, and it was like COVID. And then it was like, I stopped being that person, the founder of Dry Bar. And it was like, I think the lost myself part of it was I was looking around going, who am I? Like feeling like if I wasn't introduced at an event or a party as the founder of Dry Bar, I was like unimportant, and I was like, I don't
Mhm.
want to be unimportant. I would be annoyed if my friends didn't introduce me as the founder of Dry Bar, because then people wouldn't like know all the great shit I did. And then I was like, no, I don't want that anymore, and I came around to feeling like I want to be like more humble and in the back and not need that attention the way I once did. And it's been like I mean, there's a lot of truth. Not that I've ever had to withdraw from an actual drug, but I can see how that feels like that of like withdrawing yourself from that level of attention. And it's not like I'm Kim Kardashian and like I couldn't walk down the street, but it was my own little bubble of it that I was experiencing on a very small scale, that I was like, I just kind of lost myself in this, like, who am I really without that attachment of Dry Bar as my identity? And that's where I think it also maybe has to do with age. And now I'm like, I just don't really, I'm like, I prefer you don't introduce me as the founder of Dry Bar. Like, I don't
Mhm.
want that over me. And don't get me wrong, like it opens up a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities. And I will always like cherish that. And that is like a huge part of my identity on some level. But I prefer to just be me. And if you like me for me, that's more important versus the like, I want you to like, I know you're going to like be excited if you find out that I'm the founder of Dry Bar, but are you going to actually want to talk to me just for me? And like when you hear me. And LA is a tough city for that.
I'm
So
sure.
I'm learning to give that up of like, I don't really care if you don't know that about me now.
So that leads me to ask you, like, how did you shift your identity from the achievements to like who you are at your core? Like, what did that shift look like? What would you give advice to someone that might be, experiencing the same thing?
Well, I think it's like you have to let it go. The the need or the desire to be like, make sure like you're doing it for the right reasons versus the like, I want to feel important. I want to feel
Mm.
like, you know, it's a, I guess it's a balance, right? Because you're building a business and you're being, especially if you're like a founder who's out front and, doing all these things. It's like, enjoy it and do it, but like, trying to trying to not let it become who you are, which I didn't do that. I let it become, I like wrote it all the way home. I was like, I'm gonna like, this is I love this identity. I love all the attention that comes with it. I love it all. And and sure, like I think that's part of it, but then also like being able to take a step back and be like, that's like another side of me, and I want to be like the softer side. And I think what happens too is it translates into your personal relationships, because I think I did have this like, the world kind of revolves around me mentality with my family that is not good, and
Mm.
I don't want to be that person anymore. So I think again, it comes back to awareness, like being aware that you're doing that so you can stop doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that requires a lot of self-reflection and a lot of like paying attention and to what people are saying and having people around you. And like I said, like for me, it's like my best friend and like, people closest to me in my life are the one who will be like, call me out on shit and be like, when you said this, like it really like offended me. And I was like, oh shit, why did I say that? And it's
Mm.
a learning. And I'm like, I got it. I'm sorry, and thank you for telling me. So I think the more people we have in our lives that will like tell us and not feel afraid to offend us, which also back to the business side of things. Like for me, I think there was a time when I was surrounded by a lot of yes people who like wanted to protect me from bad things that were happening in the business. When I was like, I don't want to be protected. You know, I knew that on a business level, but I think the same thing happens when you have friends who don't really tell you like what people are really thinking about you and what you're saying,
Mm,
how it's impacting people. And like, shit, I want to know so I can be better, you know?
yeah. Would you have, looking back at Alli of that time to now, would you have like, would you say you found yourself?
I'd say I'm still finding myself. You know,
Finding. Okay.
I think I'm still, I don't know that I don't think there's a finish line, you know, I think it's an ever
Yeah.
evolving, cause you know, it's like, it depends on the day, you know, it's like our lives are constantly moving and shifting. And, you know, there's days that I just feel like, uh, you know, it's like everything's hard and I'm like on the floor. And then there's days where I feel great, you know, and I don't think that there's ever a like, oh, I have found myself. I think I have moments of feeling like, oh, I feel good where I'm at. But just stuff just shifts so much, you know, and so many things are constantly moving in our lives that work and then don't work. So I think it's like it's a job you're never done with.
Work in progress. Yeah, I get that.
Mhm.
Um, if someone listening to this picks up the book today, they read it front to back, but they could only walk away with one thing from it, what would you want that one thing to be?
I think um to like take a chance,
Mm,
take the chance, take a risk. Life is short. I think a lot of people get like one of the things I love to say, and I think it was my brother who first said it. I'm sure you've heard it now. It's like, don't let perfect get in the way of progress. And, you know, I
mm,
think that we have a mentality, which is really understandable, that like, oh, I just don't have this and this isn't right. And I can't do this because of this, you know, and it's like, sometimes you have to just go for it, you know, and it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be like, okay, everything is lined out and we are ready to go. Like always, something's always going to like not work out. Something always is going to, you know, and I think whether you're an entrepreneur or you're just at a job where you really want another position in that company and you've been afraid to ask for it, and like go ask for it. You know, I think I want people to walk away from the book feeling like inspired to go do that thing that they've been scared to do. I mean, maybe that's like leaving a relationship, getting a divorce. Like maybe it's, you know, quitting their job and starting a business. Maybe it's like, you know, changing the way that they parent their kid. You know, who knows? Like I think that there's so many of my personal and professional lessons in this book. And I think the overarching theme, I think, you know, is that, you know, it's just kind of like putting it all out there and, you know, taking the hard step. And like I so strongly believe this to my core that you have to like make hard decisions and try things that you might potentially fail at, but like you'll never, I feel like such a walking cliche, but like you'll never know if you don't try. Like you never get the thing
right.
if you don't even try for the thing, you know? So go try the thing, you know? So
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I love that. I'm going to make sure that the link to the book, as well as socials, websites, all of that good stuff, is in the show notes of this
awesome.
episode. A
Thank
couple
you.
more questions for you. One thing that we've been doing on the show, I've been doing this for 5 years. We're about to hit 300 episodes, and we just started asking a past guest to ask a future guest a question without knowing who is who. So the question for you, and I'm going to reveal who it is because I think you know this gentleman. He had asked, what is the single greatest unlock of human potential that is entirely within someone's control?
The unlock of human potential that is in someone's control.
Yeah, the single greatest unlock of human potential that we have the control over.
Uh, I guess it's, I mean, what comes to me is like discipline, like self discipline. You know, I think that
Mm,
I think that we have it within us to be great. I don't think we all choose to be great. You know, I think there's like, and I think we're all aware of it, like how hard we decide to work, how much we decide to put into whatever it is we're working on, or if we like take like the easy way out a little bit, you know? So I feel like it's like discipline and self-mastery of like really committing yourself to something and like doing it even when it's hard and uncomfortable.
Okay. I love that. And I definitely agree with that. Discipline is definitely something I'm working on. By the way, that came from Matt Higgins, guest shark on Shark Tank as well. So,
Oh, you did?
yeah, he's awesome. But the next part of that is to ask you to ask a question to a future guest.
Huh. Hmm. God, you have asked questions that no one's ever asked me before.
I'm glad. That's a good thing.
That is a good thing. What would I ask somebody? I think it would be something along the lines of something around like who would be who would be the person that you would choose to be your who are the people that you would choose to have around you if you had it to do all over again? You know, like how do you, I think we sometimes end up in this place of like, you know, a lot of founders, you know, are feel like they're very like the term solopreneur, you know, it's like you're on your own and you don't have a lot of help. Like if you could go back and have help from somebody, who would it be?
Who would your answer be? I mean, I feel like I could take a good guess based off this conversation.
I mean, you know, if it could be anybody, you know, it's like having like, you know, someone um like Tony Robbins, you know, like if
Okay.
like Tony Robbins was on your fucking team and he was like, you were talking to Tony Robbins every day, like how cool would that be? You know, I
Yeah.
just read his book, maybe that's why he's on my mind, the and Unleashing the Giant Within, and you read that, I read it in like one day and you're like yes, like everything he's saying, you know, and you're so motivated. And so like to have that, to be able to have a person, and maybe that's more to my question, is like to have the person who keeps you really honest and motivated. And again, I'm so into like the brain stuff right now, but like the power that we have over ourselves and our brain, and that comes down to the discipline and self-mastery of like we do control largely what happens to our lives and our brains, you know, which also goes back to the God question. You know, it's like Dr. Amen was telling me, he's like, when you wake up every day, I want you to say, today's going to be a good day, which feels like fucking weird and hokey, but like I did that today. You know, I also saw something where like, if you brush your teeth if you're righty and you brush your teeth with your left hand, it changes your brain chemistry. Or if you normally put your pants on right leg first, start doing it left leg first. Like all of these things like change your neuroplasticity, and that's all really fascinating to me. I mean, that's probably, you know, something I wish I mean, I wish I knew this stuff back then, you know, and that we actually have the power, because you feel a little hopeless. Like, this is just how I am. You know, how many times have we said that? Like, this is who I am, you know, which is such bullshit, you know? So it's like to be able to have someone to have, especially when I was like starting out, like to understand that I actually had that power and control. I'm also like a big fan of Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's like another.
Of course.
Yeah, it's like all that stuff is so fascinating to me, and to have, imagine having those guys, you know, or Dr. Caroline Leaf, who's another like, I think she's a psychiatrist or psychologist and like a brain enthusiast too, like having somebody around you, or Oprah, that is like in your ear telling you, helping you navigate, like a coach. That would have been
amazing. I love that.
I'm
going to give you another one too. We had Mel Robbins on the show a while ago, and I'm not sure if you're Mel Robbins.
Uh-huh.
And
Sorry,
she is that a
okay,
plane? Yeah.
It's I live in the city. They're all
Yeah.
the time.
She was promoting her book, which is all about the power of giving yourself a high five in the mirror and what that does for your brain. Because we're we're like accustomed to, like, when we give a high five to someone else, it's celebrating something, right? Like you do it on the basketball court or the football field or whatever. So like we're already wired to believe that's celebratory. So when you do that to yourself, you're celebrating yourself. There was like so much science behind it, but it's cool stuff. So there's so much out there. Like, yeah, there's a lot.
We're just like, it's becoming more mainstream, which is so awesome, you know, that this like whole, like the manifestation stuff, which kind of felt woo woo and hokey, but like there's so much science behind it that you're just reprogramming your brain, in a different way. And like, one of the other things that Dr. Amen told me was like, and it's in one of his books, he's like, write down 100 like dark thoughts. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And he's like, no, do it. And then do the turnaround, the Byron Katie turnaround on each of those thoughts. Like, is it true? Is it really true? Like how, and, and he's like, it was interesting, and how he's like, people who've done what I've told them to do change their lives, and it's like, it's relatively that simple if you have the discipline and you're actively practicing. Like I do that. I said today I'm gonna have a good day. I also read somewhere that you should tell yourself that you love yourself in the mirror in the morning 25 times. I do that too. Like I'm like, I'll fucking do anything to feel better. It's like, so bring it on.
I love that. I only have you for a minute, so I'm going to ask you one last question.
Yeah.
This is the last question that I always ask on the way out of every interview. I mean, you've given us a ton of advice. You showed up so vulnerable. Again, I'm going to thank you for that. I'm really grateful for it. You make it to whatever year you want to live to. Like you find yourself, you impact as many people, you do everything that you want to do, but you could only be remembered for one piece of advice. I'm not asking you how you want to be remembered, but if I think of Alli, this is the piece of advice that comes to mind. What's that advice?
I mean, I think I would ultimately want to be remembered for being incredibly kind and generous. It's not advice, but I think,
well, it can be.
Yeah. Like I ultimately, and I don't think I've always been is kind enough. Like I really strive for that in this phase of my life. Like I want to be incredibly kind. And it's back to like what I was saying before. I catch myself. Like I can catch myself. Like if I'm in a grocery store and the person I'm behind is going so fucking slow, and I get so annoyed, and I'm like, and then I'm like, Alli, why? Like, why do you have to be so annoyed? Like, it doesn't matter. It's no problem. Be like water. It's another thing I love. It's another great book. Is it's written by Bruce Lee's daughter. It's called Be Like Water. It's just a really fascinating the way he thought about water. It's like, water just keeps going, and if there's a rock, it goes around the rock. And so I constantly am like reminding myself of all of these things, which again is back to like what I'm telling you, like the things that I read, these are the things, and these are the things that I think about, and just being kinder and more patient and giving and generous and not making everything about me is really, I think, the big thing that I would want to be remembered for, is that, she taught me to be more generous, more kind and giving. And it's something I'm working on. I'm certainly not there.
I love it. Alli, thank you so much for this opportunity. Again,
thank you.
Book, website, socials, all of that in the show notes. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, this is great.